All right, let's dive in. Today, we're talking about a writer who didn't just write novels, she completely changed the game for English fiction. I'm talking about Charlotte Brontë. She was way more than just a novelist. She was a true pioneer whose voice took on an entire era. So what exactly made her work so revolutionary? Let's get into it. And this quote right here, it absolutely nails it. A cornerstone of feminist literature. And for very good reason. Bronte's writing is all about that deep dive into the inner lives of women. You know, their complex emotions, their struggles, and their powerful desire for independence. She is the novel not just to tell a story, but as a serious tool to critique the world she was living in. And there is no better place to start than with her most famous novel, Jane Eyre. When this was published back in 1847, she actually used a male pseudonym, Currer Bell. And this wasn't just another book on the shelf. It was this groundbreaking story about one woman's defiant fight for her own identity. So the story kicks off with Jane as an orphan, and she's suffering under the incredibly cruel hand of her aunt, Mrs. Reed. But right from the get-go, Bronte makes one thing crystal clear. Jane is not a victim. She's a resilient soul, totally determined to overcome this oppressive world she was born into. And you can really see that journey laid out here. Jane's path to becoming her own person is just this series of incredible trials. First, she somehow survives an abusive childhood. Then she endures the grim, harsh Lowood institution. And finally, she gets a little taste of freedom as a governess at a place called Thornfield Hall. It's right here that the stage is set for her ultimate fight for both personal and moral independence. So at Thornfield, this story just ignites. Jane meets her employer, the super mysterious and intense Mr. Rochester. And what starts to unfold is one of literature's most famous and, let's be real, complicated romances. It's a relationship that just completely challenges the rigid class and gender rules of Victorian England. But, of course, just when Jane gets a shot at happiness, a massive secret is revealed. Rochester is already married. His wife, Bertha Mason, is literally hidden away in the attic. This is the absolute turning point. Jane is forced into this impossible choice, right? Does she follow her heart and stay with the man she loves, or does she honor her own integrity and her self-respect and leave? Jane's choice, and really the entire novel, was just so revolutionary for so many reasons. For one, by writing in the first person, Bronte gives us this intimate, unfiltered access to a woman's mind. It's like we're right there with her. She directly attacks those restrictive gender roles, giving Jane that immoral line, "I am no bird, and no net ensnares me." Talk about a cry for freedom that still gives you chills. The book basically argues that a woman has the right to both love and her own autonomy, which was a huge critique of the entire social structure. But Bronte was just getting started. Her social commentary did not stop with Jane Eyre. Her other major works kept exploring these same vital themes: class, gender, and just how complex the human mind is, each in their own unique way. Okay, so in her second novel, Shirley, Bronte kind of zooms out and tackles the massive social upheaval of the Industrial Revolution. She uses this really turbulent time as a backdrop to look at how these huge economic changes were reshaping women's lives and their place in the world, and often not for the better. Now, what's so clever here is how Bronte uses two different heroines to make her point. On one hand, you've got Shirley Keeldar. She's wealthy, fiercely independent, and she represents a whole new, empowered path for women. And then on the other hand, you have Caroline Helstone, who really embodies all the constraints that Victorian society placed on women of her class. This isn't just a story, it's like a debate happening right on the page about the future of womanhood itself. Now, Bronte's final novel, published in her lifetime, Villette, is maybe her most profound and modern. It follows the main character, Lucy Snow, as she moves to this fictional European town. But the real journey here isn't about geography. Nope. It's a deep and often pretty painful exploration of Lucy's inner world, her loneliness, her repressed desires, and her desperate search for meaning in a world that just seems totally indifferent to her. And Villette is an absolute masterclass in what we call the psychological novel. So what does that mean? Well, it means the story is focused almost entirely on what's going on inside a character's head, their thoughts, their emotional turmoil, their mental landscape. At a time when novels were all about external plot, Bronte turned inward, using things like dreams and even unreliable narration to capture Lucy's psyche with a depth that was just way, way ahead of its time. So when you step back and look at all of her work, what is Charlotte Bronte's ultimate legacy? Well, it's not just one novel or one character. It's the fundamental shift in what a novel could even do. I mean, her contributions are just immense. She created these female main characters who were strong, independent, and felt psychologically real. She used the novel as a scalpel for sharp social criticism. She blended this dark, gothic atmosphere with raw emotional intensity. And really, she just paved the way for countless writers who came after her. And it's pretty wild to see how quickly all of this happened. Jane Eyre was an instant sensation in 1847. Shirley followed just 2 years later, tackling those big social issues head-on. Then, Villette, her most introspective work, came out in 1853. And The Professor, which was actually the first novel she ever wrote, was finally published after her death, giving us this incredible glimpse into the very beginning of her journey. And that really leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? Bronte gave a voice to women who were fighting for their own identity in a world that was actively trying to silence them. So now, over 175 years later, her work kind of forces us to ask ourselves, what are the